Ignazio Alboré, Second Democracy. The Value Cycle, Chapter 8, Part 3. I believe that goods are subject to a value cycle. First phase. When created, every good has a use value for its creator. Second phase. If its creator decides to sell it, the latter begins to assume a market value, formed by A. Production cost, B. What the consumer is willing to pay for it, C. Innovative value if the good has novel characteristics. Third phase. When a good begins to have a large diffusion or mass diffusion, it acquires a social and political value. Therefore, the state and the organized power begin to regulate it, subsidize it, control it, tax it, protect it, hinder it, choose it to the detriment of another good, not choose it in favor of another good, or reduce its production. Thus, what I call a metamorphosis of value occurs, through the tools of state values and through what I will call the J effect. If goods have a limited diffusion, their value is also determined by preferences and shortage, but when they become useful to many people or to an entire country, the value begins to be determined according to political utility. Even goods with an innovative value, when they reach a mass diffusion, take on a social value. Fourth phase. Those who have obtained profits, advantages, privileges, protection, work, and political consensus through the market tend to preserve and defend the rent obtained, be it economic, patrimonial, financial, salary, political, consensus, prestige, occupational, position. Also, because they pay taxes on those advantages. The price is a rent for certain companies, certain productive categories, confederations of entrepreneurs, unions, parties. A certain salary is the rent for certain categories of workers and for unions. A certain price of certain key goods and a certain salary of certain key sectors is a rent for the government or the political class in power. Everything is subject to loss of value and all positions of advantage are called into question, sooner or later. Therefore, everyone, everywhere, defends themselves from these tendencies. Economic freedom allows A, who is poor, disadvantaged, to become first rich. But when A has become first rich and holder of rents, that same freedom becomes insidious for him and tends to maintain that advantageous situation. Because that same freedom also allows B, who is poor, disadvantaged, to become first rich, advantaged, threatening A. The latter will therefore tend to make the same conditions that led to its success rigid, through limitations on competition, regulations, market distortions. For this to happen, it will turn to the state, politics, laws, it will create business organizations, union demands, welfare state, business associations, unions, agreements between private individuals, protectionism, taxes, regulation, subsidies, bailouts. Fifth phase. The freedom of the market, although always limited by the state values, at the height of its development physiologically leads to widespread and imposing situations of concentration of companies in the most important goods. A few firms, or just one, prevail over others, because they are more competitive or more powerful, more innovative or more astute, more connected and politically protected, more subsidized, more regulated or less taxed, etc. Oligopolistic value. In some situations, therefore, the greater the competition and freedom, the greater the probability of having unfree value and prices, because they are determined by dominant positions, barriers to entry, cartels and agreements between oligopolists. I call this phenomenon the free market paradox. Sixth phase. The good that has acquired a social and political value is replaced by a competing or alternative good, through choices of the state or organized power. This again determines the value of the replaced good, which is put out of the market because it is displaced by the choices of the state. In this phase, the good acquires a replacement value. The substitution value is low if the state's choice in favor of the substitute good makes it difficult to prefer the substitute good, and if there is no longer any need for the latter, not even for a small group of individuals, absence of marginal demand, it is medium-high, higher than the value of the substitute. If the state's choice in favor of the substitute makes possible a preference for the substitute, and if there is a need for the latter for a significant number of individuals, presence of alternative demand, it is high, higher than the value of the substitute. If the state's choice in favor of the substitute makes a preference for the substitute difficult, and if there is even a small portion of individuals who need the latter, presence of marginal demand.